Well, I'm going to kick things off, everybody, if I could have your attention. Just so you know, this is the only mic that works today, so the presenters are going to come up. So we have Belonging from each other here today, and also our new communications director. I wanted you to meet them both because June, we already had someone booked, and I'm not sure. We'll see how July and August goes. I'd like to continue this, but you know, we get so busy in the summer months. I don't want to make a true commitment until I know what we have for assets. So the good news from my standpoint today, talking to you, is I have to leave you after I present these folks because I'm going to be interviewing another lateral transfer police officer. So that'll bring us up to, I'll have one opening for right now, and then two openings, July 1 and July 2. So if this works out today, that'll basically be 18 people that we've hired since July 1st, which is pretty amazing. Yeah, it's pretty, if you think about it, when I took over, we had one person in the academy. It took us a year to get one person off a civil service list, and we were able to basically, hopefully today, make a conditional offer to someone who's coming to us from a community off Cape, who's actually a supervisor. So we're bringing in a seasoned person who's got a lot of experience. So I'm excited for that. So I will have to leave a little sooner than I'd like today. But things are going very well with the police department. It's been really an exciting 10-plus months for me personally and for the team. We're going to be having assessments this month. We're going to be promoting 4 sergeants, a lieutenant, a captain, and our first ever deputy police chief. So I'm very excited for what's ahead of us in July and for the growth of our department, and then creating opportunities for people that it's so important. So I know a lot of people say we hired a chief from outside and it's prevents us from moving up. Well, that's not the case. We're adding 2 sergeant positions. We're adding a deputy chief's position. Just so you know, we just wrote the grant for several $100,000 for body-worn camera programs. As soon as we get out of the summer, we're going to get back on the accreditation bandwagon, and I'm going to start working towards implementing body-worn cameras. So these are really some really good initiatives that we have moving forward that I'm excited to share with you to show how transparent we are as an agency to better serve you folks. And with that being said, I'll segue into today's program. So I was very humbled. I was asked to sit at the advisory board for Belonging to Each Other. And Belonging to Each Other's a fabulous group that really helps those in crisis, those that are unhoused. So I'm very happy that they agreed to come today. When they're done presenting and answering your questions, then we're going to have James Thomas. He is our new communication director. No one is happier to have him here than me as your former temporary director. So he's doing a fantastic job. Again, he'll tell you about the great initiatives he's working on. And it's awesome having him on the team. He's been a very welcomed addition in many ways. So that being said, I will turn it over to Belonging to Each Other. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you, Chief. We are honored to have him on our advisory committee. My name is Gina Torielli. I'm the Executive Director. This better? Thank you. If you can't hear, do this, because I tend to walk away from the mic. Executive Director of Belonging to Each Other. Now, how many of you have you even heard of us? Not too many, right? So what do? We have, for the last 9 years, we have been helping our Falmouth neighbors who are experiencing homelessness as they transition from being homeless to stable housing. So how many of you have seen a homeless person in Falmouth? More, right? And it seems like there are more recently even than in the past, and that's true. I used to always get the question, do we even have homeless people in Falmouth? What does your organization do? And, it's easy to feel that way because unlike what you see sort of in urban settings or even somewhere like Hyannis, we don't have crowds of people necessarily on Main Street or things like that that are very visible. People here tend to melt into sort of the edges and fringes. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what our programs are to give you an idea of the scope of what's been happening in this area. And then I'd love to ask you a lot of, or have you ask me a lot of questions, because I'm sure you have them. On your table, there is a sheet by the numbers. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but it'll give you a sense of what is happening in this area and how much work there is to do. So what belonging to each other does is we're part of a network of groups that include the police department and especially the new social workers that they have added. It includes the town's human services department. It includes other agencies from outside of Falmouth that work in Falmouth to help people experiencing homelessness. We are Falmouth born and bred and serve only people who are connected to Falmouth. We do that in a way that lets people come in out of the elements, have some respite at no cost, while we help them to turn their lives around. So for 9 years now, this has been our base program, and for many years we operated it with just volunteers, and we would open up in the fall and close, a few months later, and now we do it for 6 months, from November to April, the cold weather months. So we rent housing that's otherwise used in the summer for Airbnb or whatever, but we rent housing, provide care in terms of a place to sleep, computers and phones to use, an address, food, what have you. And this year we provided 2,025 nights of housing. 12 to 14 people at a time, serve 24 different people. You may be surprised, more women than men. It's been that way for the last few years. You may also be surprised to know that more than 45% were over the age of 50. Actually, that's less old than they have been the last 2 years. Last year, more than 60% were over the age of 50. So what we're seeing is a rise in senior homelessness. Part of that is people being displaced from apartments they may have rented or houses that they may have been living with, where someone passes away, the house gets sold, and here they are, right? So where did the people come from? Most of them are living in a car, in a tent, over by the shopping plazas, over by the bike paths, things like that, where they kind of melt in. They may be on the beach. Some of them have come here looking for work, or because of a disruption in their family, they spend their money on a motel while they look for someplace cheap to rent, and guess what? There isn't anything. There's very little available. And where they end up, in our case this year, 80% of them, we were able to get them in some type of housing, apartment, something, or in some kind of a group home, for themselves. Or in one case, it was someone who went to a nursing home because of, some of the folks are disabled or elderly and need that. Some go back to family. So that's what we can do with people when you give them hope, when you give them wraparound support at a critical moment in their life where they're desperate to make a change. We do meet every 2 weeks with the police department and all these other agencies we talked about, and we together figure out which agency can best help someone, what people need. They refer people to us, we refer people to them, and it's a wonderful safety net for people here in town. And at any given time, that group is working with between 40 and 70 different people who are homeless here in Falmouth. The other thing that we work on, and it's a kind of a bigger program, but our role is more limited, is in the winter, in addition to the 14 or so people who live in our houses, there are still more people who, are out there in Falmouth. And there is a program that involves emergency housing in a motel here in town. and people can stay there while the temperatures are below 32 degrees. Temperatures are above 32 degrees, they are still out in their tent, in their car, what have you. But there is no homeless shelter on the Upper Cape like there is in Hyannis, and the one in Hyannis has only 45 beds in it and is constantly full. So this program, which is called In From the Streets, is funded through various grants and run by an organization called Duffy Health Center. The Falmouth Service Center contributes also to help folks with that. We feed them, because what we found a couple of years ago is they end up in a hotel that's away from everything, they don't have transportation, and they didn't have food. So we have volunteers who gather at the service center, cook meals, freeze them, package those with kits of shelf-stable food, and deliver them on call. In the last 6 months, they were on call 85 nights when it was that cold, and they were serving an average of 15 people a night. And these were volunteers, and with some help, from our coordination, working on that. And they served 1,289 nights of meals and almost 4,000 individual meals. Wow, huh? That was up from 765 nights and 2,200 meals. So a huge increase in the number of people needing shelter. These are typically people who are coming out of a car or a tent when it's just it's dangerously cold. And then the third thing that we do is we have social workers who help guide people in the homes, but they also will help other people who are from this community who are looking for, where do I go? How can I get from A to Z? Because if you think about it, think about what it would be like for you to be outside with a cell phone that you can't charge because you don't have a home, no restroom, no place to shower, no place to get you can't get a phone call back. How are you even going to get in line for anything? How are you even going to get a job? So, we are working on addressing those issues, again, in collection with others, including the police. But our role is to be really the voice for people experiencing homelessness in Falmouth. So that's who we are. I'd like to hear what you want to know. Any questions? Yes. The question is, what about outreach services? So this is where the team is important, because there's an agency, Housing Assistance Corporation, that operates Cape-wide. They have people who work here in Falmouth doing outreach. The town has several people on their human services department that will go out, because we go out in pairs, we go out. We do some outreach ourselves if it's somebody we've been working with. And then, they help us find people. So we, again, work together, for that. So there is outreach that is being done. So one question I get a lot is, what do I do if I see somebody who looks homeless or in distress? Couple of things. One is you can call us, and I have a card on your table for Carol Greeley, who's our clinical director. You can call the Human Services Department. You can call the police and ask for the social work department, or you can call the Housing Assistance Corp's outreach number. Those numbers are on that red card that's on your desk, and I have more of them. And those are also something you can feel free to give to someone that you know of, because some of you may have family members, some of you, because the face of homelessness here in Falmouth there's not a typical face. There are people who are waiting on you at the stores or at the restaurants here that you would never think are going home and living in their car, but they are. And in fact, one of the 24 people that we have had in our houses this year, we have had people that have been working in some of the big boxes and living in their car outside until they could come in with us. You know, there are going to be people that have had a medical issue or what have you, and they don't have family here, you know, to help them. And we get call from the hospital emergency room, you know, you know, can we place someone while they recover? You know, those are the types of things that aren't necessarily typical. You know, most of the women that we work with have been subject to some kind of partner violence or, you know, real trauma that, you know, that has sort of led them to this point. So, but that's how we do the outreach. We work collectively, and that's part of what those meetings are about is, so if you connect with any one of us, we will make sure that person is reached out to. Often we know who they are. You can't necessarily force someone to come into housing or do medication, but you can certainly be there to catch them at that critical point when they're ready to do it. So we work in concert. That's a good question. Other questions? Yes. Yes. No. So the question is, do we think Falmouth needs a shelter? I would say, I think the Upper Cape probably needs, because there isn't one anywhere on the Upper Cape. You know, in the Outer Cape, so much of the housing is vacant that they usually can find a place for somebody in a motel or something. So, you know, Falmouth has become the second largest population, you know, because there's a count that's done every year by as part of the federal government's count of homeless people. And, you know, we have the second largest population on the Cape, but that makes sense because we have a hospital, we have services, we're the second really largest town once you're outside of Hyannis. But, you know, the difficulty is there is only really one operator of homelessness shelters here on the Cape and South Cape, and they don't want to open another one this close. It's difficult to do. But and that's what this In From the Streets program is designed to fill in for. But you're right. We are consciously leaving people outside in a car, but hopefully never, and it's from a healthcare perspective, is it likely they're going to die? What a cruel way to think about things, but that is where we are right now. So, other questions? Yes. Thank you for asking. So the question is, you know, what happens for the people who kind of graduate? And it is sort of, it can be fluid for people. Sometimes the first try sticks, right? And sometimes it takes longer. So, you know, we do operate 12 to 14 beds at a time, but we serve more like 20 plus people because that is exactly what happens. People find something, they move out. One of the things that's critical about what we've been doing, and we've been doing this now for 3 years, is we've started following them because we have built a trust relationship with them, and we, you know, so we make sure, you know, we check in on them, see how they're doing. And, you know, what we found is that has helped people keep from falling out of homelessness. I mean, we have, and often we're working with people who haven't rented or haven't rented in a long time. They may have even owned their house before, but, you know, now they don't have something. And they don't necessarily know, like, how do I get on a fuel assistance program? Or, you know, my car is broken down, so I'm going to pay for the car instead of the rent. You know, so we work with the landlords and with them to kind of help keep them until they really feel, you know, more secure. So typically we're following people for up to 2 years. Some are ready to go because they haven't been homeless for very long, and so they can pop right back. But about 80% of the people we work with have been, chronically homeless, more than a year in the last 3. So we do that, and I think that's a really important part of what we do. Other questions? Yes. So we typically house adults because we're in rental housing and but there are always family involved. And so, a lot of the folks we are with, and I can give you 2 examples from this year. One young woman came to us in December. It was almost a little bit like a Hallmark movie or something, or a lifestyle movie. She was 8 months pregnant, and she was living outside. And she knew that once she had the baby, that she couldn't keep it, because if she didn't have a place that could be inspected and what have you as safe and whatever for a child, she couldn't keep the baby. It would go into foster care. So we had her come in with us. She could only stay with us till she had the baby, because we just aren't equipped to deal with that situation. And we were able to get her connected with the program that the state has for people with young children and what have you. And she is now in that state shelter program, and her baby is with her. Almost all the women we have children that they have lost. Because if you are homeless and you have a minor child, that child can be taken away from you. And because you're not in a safe situation. So we had a young couple, and we have a men's house and a women's house. So he went to the men's house, she went to the women's house, and they worked and saved, because one of the things we have them do is save. And we were able to get them into an apartment where they could be reunified with their 4-year-old child that the grandparents were taking care of, had custody of, because they didn't have a home. They had been waiting in the car for a subsidized apartment to come up, but not realizing the paperwork wasn't in place for them ever to come up. Didn't know, right? We got them into the apartment. I got to meet the 4-year-old. It was great. But yeah, so there are children involved, although not necessarily at where we are. When we started, there are family houses that are operated in the North Falmouth area, and so that were strictly for young children and families. So we kind of picked up the rest of the population. Other questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. So this puts a lot of pressure on us to make sure they have somewhere good to go. And so everybody who was in the house, but one, had a place to go to. They went to one of these apartments, congregate house, they had a place to go to, because that's what we work with them on. But yeah, the one person wanted to move to Boston, and so that's what they did. But we do, if they do, and occasionally there's 1 or 2 at the end of the year who go back into the woods for whatever reason, we continue to work with them. And this is actually for us a good statistic for April, because sometimes we're working with them over the summer, and then by September they get an apartment. Yes. Right. What does that mean?
Was it someone who was born here, perhaps?
It's both of those, because it's hard to say Falmouth resident when someone doesn't have a home, right? So we do have a definition that's about this long, but one of it is someone who has been living in Falmouth and lost their Falmouth housing. They could be someone whose children are in the Falmouth schools, and there are a number of homeless families where the children are going to the schools. They can be that relative who moved here but is insecurely housed. One of the problems that you have with, for example, in a lot of the housing that is rental, there's rules about how long someone can visit you. So, if you have a child who comes an adult child who comes to live with, say, an elderly parent, they can stay for 2 weeks or so, but then they get in trouble if they're renting because they can't be there for that long. And so we end up stepping in because we don't want the grandmother or the mother to lose their apartment because they're trying to help a child. So those are the types of things. That's what we mean by Falmouth Connect. The goal is to get them into stable housing. Yeah, that's our goal. Yeah. Yes. Right. So some people don't make it. I'm sorry to step over you, and I'm supposed to say what you're saying, so I apologize for both. So the question is, our goal is to get people housed by the end of the season, which it is, but some people don't, and we do have people who we have rules in the house because it's their people sharing rooms in a house. So we sometimes have people who there's an issue with drugs or something else, and they're given an opportunity to to change their ways. But if they decide to go, and that was we are seeing a lot of substance use disorder, they go. And so of the 5 that didn't get housed of our total, 4 of them were a situation where they left because of that or because there was behavior that was endangering the others. And then, so there was only the one who was still at the house that wanted to go to Boston. So, yes, Elliot. Oh, okay, so, yeah, I feel like I'm leaning into this, and I can't quite lean all the way forward. Elliot has asked, talk about the new house. I mentioned that we've been using rental housing all this time, renting from landlords, and that's part of why we can't go year round, or because the house has to go back to be used for summer rental. So for a while, we've been looking to have control of our own houses, so we know that the houses are there. We've had a couple of years where we couldn't even find a rental, particularly for the men, until October. That was very nervous-making. And also because, we want houses where, we're comfortable about the safety and, that there's proper exits and that type of thing. So we had the opportunity come up to purchase from the Falmouth Housing Trust, which is the local land bank, a building called the Gerald Flynn House. And it was originally set up as housing for homeless veterans, and has been used for years. But they needed to get out of that. It's a longer story than I want to tell. But for us, it was an opportunity to purchase a home that is well set up, that we can have a house manager in, that people can have their own rooms because it's 7 bedrooms plus a house manager bedroom. And we were able to buy it in part with a grant, but in large part from donations from people in Falmouth. I mean, we are funded by donations from people in this area. And so we're by Falmouth, for Falmouth, paid for by Falmouth. And that gives us the opportunity to be flexible and address issues as they come up, to make changes as the population changes, to identify new issues that are coming up and try to address them. That gives us that. Other questions? Yes. Absolutely. More than a third of our funding comes from grants from local, mostly local foundations, and it is a group of volunteers. And this is another piece that I want my colleague Dan Persicchini to talk about. But we have 80 plus volunteers who help us with a variety of issues, and one of them is grant funding. So we have a group of, I think it's 8 now, volunteers who write grants for us, and are we're quite successful with that. So we get support from the Falmouth Fund and the Cape Cod Foundation, and other local organizations or family foundations. So any more questions for me? Because I would like to give Dan a chance to talk a little bit about how you might be able to help as a volunteer if you're thinking about that type of thing. So I'd like to introduce Dan Persicchini, who's our volunteer treasurer, and to speak about that.
Thank you, Gina. As Gina started to talk about this organization grew up as an all-volunteer organization, but it still relies heavily on volunteers. So some of the things that, we have opportunities for, we talked about the meal program. So we have volunteers who go to the service center and help us prepare meals when we need to. We have volunteers that provide transportation. A lot of our residents, they're working, so they need transportation to jobs, they need transportation to medical appointments, all kinds of different things, housing appointments to get them into stable housing. As we just noticed, we own our own home now, so there are challenges that come with owning a home. I think, as everybody knows, we just had a leak, so we had to get a plumber. So, people who are handy can help our organization as well on the house that we own. We have help in packing envelopes for our drives. So we have appeals where we do fundraising. Again, our money, the way we support the organization is through fundraising. We have several events that volunteers can help at. We have a big event in September at the Kumanesset, where we have our annual event, which is kind of our main fundraiser. And then for our houses, which are November through April, because we're renting those, we have to move people in and out. And so there's a whole process around getting those houses ready, around getting those houses cleaned out and back to original state when we're finished with them. So again, owning our own house gives us a little bit more flexibility there, so that may become a little easier going forward, but still there's a lot of opportunities there as well. And they talked about the grant writing committee. So 80 volunteers do a variety of different things. If there's some way, somehow, you want to get involved with the organization, there are a variety of different ways we can use you in helping supporting that organization if there's something that you're interested in doing. Any questions on any of the volunteer opportunities? So the question was if people need transportation to appointments or different types of things, are we involved in that? Yes, we are. Actually, we hired a volunteer coordinator this year because we have such a big volunteer base that helps organize that. So we put in a new tracking system last year to be able to more easily administer those types of services for our volunteers so that we could, match up the needs of who's available and when we can use them. And that's what our volunteer coordinator is doing. Any other questions? Okay. Our new emergency communications.
Good morning, everyone. My name's James Thomas. I'm the second half of the program. And I just want to say before I start that I'm just really humbled to share this morning's program with belonging to each other, Gina and Dan. And, I'll say that you mentioned the way this touches families, that in recent times, a family member of mine who is in fact employed is experiencing some housing insecurity. So it cuts close to home, and I appreciate the opportunity to share this time with you this morning. I have been the Emergency Communications Director for the Falmouth Emergency Communications Center for, I think, 12 weeks now, so I'm just getting started. How many of you had at least some awareness that we were having some staffing challenges in the Emergency Communications Center? I know that became a bit public-facing in the local media and some contentiousness. In fact, just shortly after my arrival, we got down to one full-time dispatcher. We had one full-time communications officer. We're supposed to be staffed 24/7, 365, with a minimum staffing of 2 operators. So obviously, we had some staffing problems. That, although this situation here in Falmouth was, by everyone's admission, particularly bad, particularly tough staffing situation here, what we saw here locally actually is representative of a larger staffing challenge in the 911 industry and the public safety communications industry nationwide. It's sometimes pointed out that the police service and the fire service are very old public safety services. There were firefighters in ancient Rome, right? The American Police Service, as we know it today, goes back to give or take the 1830s or the 1850s when we begin to see, modern policing. Our industry, public safety communications, is very much younger than that. Public safety radio communications go back to, say, the late 30s, early 40s, right? Maybe there might be a few of you here who remember the old days of you'd be listening to something on the AM and then it would be breaker, right? And they would break in and the police car would break in because it was only the one radio frequency, right? And everyone was sort of sharing that. President Nixon designated 911 as the national emergency number in the late 60s, I believe 69. President Clinton actually, that was just a designation, not everyone was using it. President Clinton designated 911 and actually put it into play in the mid-90s, I want to say 97. And for about the past 5 to 6 years here in the Commonwealth, we've been on a next generation 911 system. So what we actually have in terms of 911 and public safety communications today has experienced a pace of change, a radical pace of change that has made the human resources aspect of the industry hard to keep up with. Today, if we go to hire an operator, historically, the job has always been hard. The job has always been hard. And I hold our forebears in this industry who have been doing the job in the previous generations, they did a great job. And it has always been a stressful job. But today, if you were to walk over just next door and come into my shop, you would see an operator who's sitting in front of about 10 computer monitors, 3 or 4 phones, managing at any given time 5 or 6 complex software platforms, drawing information from a variety of sources, human, the internet, telephone, right? So now we're looking for a information technologist, highly skilled information technologist, very high degree of comfort moving around multiple computers, entering information without error. But of course, it's also still a human service industry, right? You're still trying to help people, so they have to be, a lot of your computer techs, maybe fair to say, don't always have the best bedside manner, right? People that can use computers at that level because you don't need to do it. But in our shop, really have to have that drive for public service, that commitment to helping people, right? So now you're looking for somebody who's a really good information technologist, who also really loves to help people, has a high drive, and, oh, by the way, it's a 24/7, 365 environment. They got to be rough and ready enough to do midnights, overnights, long double shifts, forced overtimes, no holidays with their family, right? And I think basically what happened is that the pace of change technologically didn't really kind of keep up with the human resources side of things and the way we value the people that do the work. And so the job kind of fell into disfavor. And as we saw here locally, and as we're seeing nationally, just about every 911 center in the United States is understaffed. I can tell you, I went to a talk with the director of 911 for the city of Austin, Texas. He's supposed to have 180 operators. That's his staffing. He's supposed to have 180. He had 80. So he's running his center at 40% staffing. So this is the kind of thing that's endemic. Now, the actions we've taken since I've gotten here 12 weeks ago, I'm happy to report that we're up to 5. We're up to 5 full-timers signed off. We're also using per diem operators. We are more than happy to welcome in experienced communications officers from other towns who, if they want to work on a day off or a night off, they're more than welcome to come and join us here in Falmouth. We'd be glad to have their help and expertise while we get staffed. As Chief Lourie alluded to earlier, we are particularly eager to attract lateral transfers. We've done some great work with our union recently to strengthen our collective bargaining agreement to make Falmouth a more attractive destination for an experienced operator. And I know we do have some people considering an offer that we're making. So hopefully brighter times are ahead in terms of our staffing. From when I got here, we were down to 1. We're now up to 5 and making our way up in terms of staffing so that y'all are protected by highly trained, competent operators. So when you call 911, you get connected to the right level of service right away. So that's what we're working on. I think I would just, to sort of in keeping with the spirit of this morning's program, one of the other things that we see in the 911 industry today, you dial 911, you get asked where you are, and you get asked what's going on, right? Where are you? What's the problem? And the system historically has sort of been set up to do 3 things: send an ambulance, send a police car, send a fire truck. There's sort of 3 buttons. Where are you and what do you need? You want me to push the ambulance button, the fire truck button, or the police car button? And I think in the 911 world, we get to be the first and initial point of contact to see some of the gaps in the social safety net here in Falmouth and, of course, across the nation, where lots of people's problems don't fit tidily into any of those boxes. They have just fallen through the social safety net, and it's not necessarily a crime, and nothing is necessarily on fire, and they don't necessarily need ambulance transport to the hospital, but they do need help. They do need help. And so that's really the growing edge for us in 911, the role of the 988 line for things that don't fit tidily into that box. I really believe in that. I believe in the 988 number, and those of us in 911 know that sometimes creating that alternative could open a pathway where an emergency response was needed. So lots of things to work out on that front. That's just sort of a high-level overview. I'm very happy to be here. I didn't really introduce myself other than to say that I should say I have most recently, I come to you from the sheriff's office where I was 9 years. I was the training and education coordinator for the sheriff's ECC, Emergency Communications Center. And, what I see for Falmouth here is, I think, an extraordinary opportunity. The rest of the Cape is regionalizing their 911 services, and you will, within the next 3 to 5 years, you will basically see 2 large regional emergency communication centers on the Upper Cape, the Sheriff's Center and the new center that's being formed between Barnstable, Yarmouth, and Sandwich. And for us, it does seem that we're going to remain a standalone consolidated center. And it's my intention, I came here to do that well and to provide the highest level of service so that when people from Falmouth get connected to 911, they get the right response out the door, a compassionate operator on the end of the phone who's able to take them through the emergency they perceive they are having. So with that being said, I'd be very happy to take questions. I'm sure you all got questions about 911 and how it all works and what we're working on. So go ahead, ma'am. Okay, so in Massachusetts now, we are down to, in most cases, and it can get complicated with the way that things bounce off cell phone towers, but the acronym you're looking for is PSAP, Public Safety Answering Point. And those that answer for any given community, every community has a designated primary PSAP, the place that answers for that town. For historical reasons going back about 30 years that I don't think any of us that are involved now had anything to do with, Falmouth's primary PSAP was given up to the Barnstable County Sheriff's Office. So if you call 911 from Falmouth whether on a wireline device, which is to say an actual telephone, if you've still got one of those, a copper wire telephone, whether that or whether you call from a cellular phone and it identifies your location through the software as being in Falmouth, the first person you will speak to is a call taker at the Barnstable County Sheriff's Office. Then you will be routed, but they don't process the call. They simply answer, and then they route the call here. And secondarily, you will speak to our Falmouth office. That is correct.
Will we ever get anything more local?
I would say that broadly speaking, I really support all the regionalization efforts. So let me just kind of, Massachusetts and the way 911 works in Massachusetts is truly unique nationwide. When I started in the industry, I believe we had 241 PSAPs in the Commonwealth. That is down now to, they might be at 210 to 215. They're constantly trying to regionalize them. Now, the reason they want to do that is that, as I said, the technology is really driving the industry. So the state 911 department does not want to be managing phones and equipment, and it's all very complex stuff, right? They don't want to be managing it in 241 places. They don't want 241 potential points of failure where things could break down. They want to be managing the equipment in smaller number of places, and rightfully so. It's also the case that when towns, cities or towns, have regionalized in the past, they have also, in addition to giving up their 911 to a primary PSAP, they have also given up in whole or in part their dispatch services. So it is fair to say that this is a unique arrangement where someone else answers for us, but we do all the call processing. That is a unique arrangement, but your question was, will we ever get it back? It seems unlikely that they would ever release anyone from a primary that they've established. Ma'am. Yes, go ahead. Mhm. Yeah, and I would say that that's sort of on the growing edge for us locally and in the industry. The industry continues to be built up on this idea that there's a police truck or a police car, a fire truck, or an ambulance that gets dispatched. It is not at this point in time a decision that a line dispatcher would make that, oh, this is a mental health call, we'll send it. That's not made at the desk. That I would say that decision is made more by police officers in the field, desk sergeants, duty sergeants, who are seeing the details of the call populate as it's being entered into the system and saying, this is an appropriate situation to deploy a clinician. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. You know, and that is this idea in the expanding vision of rights that we have in this country, that it is only sort of 25 years old in practice that you can dial those three numbers and get what you need. And I'm always happy to hear that someone had a positive experience doing it. So thank you very much. Yes. Yes. Sure. I mean, 988 and it's a mental health hotline. Let me just say, sort of, this is not precisely my area of expertise, but those with perhaps contemplating self-injury or maybe have taken some actions down that path, and are feeling, for whatever reason, that they don't want to engage with the public safety apparatus, which is to say cops, ambulances. They're not there, but alternative pathways to help. That 988 is active in Massachusetts, and it is possible to call and get connected to mental health resources that don't necessarily involve the dispatch of apparatus to wherever you are. And I think on the whole, that's a good thing. Now, it is possible that any 988 call, if somebody said, I've, barricaded myself in a room with a long gun or something, that would be transitioned over to our side of the aisle. But it's good that people have that outlet to talk, because it is, as I said, it's hard when the only three choices are the cop car, the ambulance, or the fire truck. I can certainly admit as a public safety official that life is a lot more complicated than that. And so it's good that there's alternative pathways to seeking help. Yes, ma'am. So this is really, I teach this topic a lot. The question is, when should I call 911, basically? And one of the interesting sort of things that happens is that there's very much a generational divide on this question that we see in the field. Young people will see whatever, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example. A seagull that they don't think is in the right place, and they'll dial 911. There's a seagull, it's like, well, that's not an emergency. Sometimes among the generation that's maybe more represented in this room, there's a reticence to call and say, oh, I don't know if I really merit that level of attention. And people will call and say, oh, I'm not sure if this is an emergency. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. My husband fell down the stairs. It's like, yeah, that's it. That was an emergency. So it's okay to call 911 if you have a perception that you are having an emergency. You have permission to do that. We investigate all sorts of things. My neighbor is, burning leaves, and it maybe is getting a little out of control. It's okay to call for that. We will, on our end, sort out what the response is. We're not going to send 15 fire trucks to that. We'll make an appropriate response. But, in general, I think if you have a legitimate perception that you are experiencing a public safety emergency, you should go ahead and call 911. And the truth is that we're actually able to provide a higher level of service over 911 than we are if you call the business line. If you call 911, we see you on a live map. We can trace your call. We can see who your carrier is. If you call 911, we can really help you. If you call the business line, we're blind. You're just calling us on the phone. So sometimes calling 911 actually, even if you're on the fence, it's helpful for us to just see the data come in. Thank you. Anybody else? All right, so like I said, it's been my honor to present and to share this forum with you folks this morning. If anybody ever wants to take a tour of the communication center next door, look me up, and I'd be happy to show you around. We've got 4 consoles over there right now. 2 of them are staffed, and we're always happy to share our operation with the public. I continue to be deeply committed to getting our staffing up and clawing our way out of the staffing hole that was there when I got hired. So thank you for all your support, and it's been lovely to talk to you.